Welcome back to Gaffers Salon. I'm John Roach, gaffer, owner-op here in New York City, founder of Gaffers Salon. And today we're going to do a little first look review on a brand new light by Intellytech. Now I decided to start with it built, just so you can get a sense of the size of this. So this is a 4 by 6 foot RGBWW 800 watt matte light that is relatively lightweight. It is called their Mega 12 FC. FC meaning full color, right? So a little disclaimer, a little backstory as we get started. Yes, Intellytech sent me this light. Yes, I do get to keep it after the review, which is what makes this a paid endorsement. But Intellytech does not get any say in the review or sway of my opinions, etc. And as you know from watching previous episodes, I don't review products that I don't like, right? Every product has some pros and cons, and that's just the nature of the business, right? You're going to have things, and you know, my pros and cons might be different than your pros and cons. So I try to stay objective, try to stay neutral, and just talk about what actually this product is, and also my experience with it. And that's sort of the backstory. I've had a long history of working with Intellytech's Mega Cloths, which is their largest sort of foldable, transportable matte lights. So it started at least 4 or 5 years ago. They launched the Mega Cloth 2.0, which was like a 3.5 by 5 foot matte light that was relatively affordable, had decent color metrics, and was sort of a perfect fit into my workflow and the types of work I do. I bought one, I liked it so much, I bought a second one and then a third one. Last year we saw Intellytech launch their second generation of the Mega series. That's the 3.0 series. And those are available in a variety of different sizes. They're available both in bicolor and in full RGBWW. And as I chatted with Aaron at Intellytech, I think he found that a lot of people were really gravitating to the RGBWW mats. Even if they didn't necessarily work in color that frequently, it did give everyone the ability to change and shift green and magenta. The light, because it was full color, had green and magenta correction built in. And for on those rare occasions where somebody needed a pink or a deep saturated blue, they had that capability. Now, as we move into the Mega 12, this they're sort of considering, you know, more of a pro line of lights, and based on user feedback, they have launched this light only in RGBWW. And previously, Ceramex was an optional extra you could add at the time of purchase. Now it is built in and included with every Mega 12. So the Mega 12 is just launched. B&H, I think, is the exclusive distributor, at least at the time of launch. This retail price on this is $3,500 USD. The launch sale price is $29.99. Now that is a pretty exceptionally low price point for a giant 4 by 6 foot 800 watt matte light. I think it's an exceptional value, and I think that brings us to an important discussion on value and value brand companies. I think Intellytech is among a number of companies that are sort of trying to make professional, high quality products that come in at a lower price point. So of course, anytime you do that, you have to sort of look at who your market is. And I think if you asked Aaron at Intellytech, he would say the bulk of their market is owner-operators, gaffers with gear, gaffers, DPs with gear and vans, that sort of, you know, industrial, corporate, dock market, not really the feature and episodic TV folks. So when you're in that market and you're looking to distinguish yourself, you're looking to build stuff at certain price points, you have to think about what are the essential things you must have. What are the things that would be really nice to have and would be an added benefit to your users? And what are those things that really can be left out, right? Those things that are going to dramatically increase the cost of that light. So if you're pricing this light on a 15-day ROI, this is going out the door for $200 a day. That is remarkably inexpensive when you consider something. Let's take, for example, a light matte Spectrum from 2019, the 2L, right? The 100 watt small light. Those go out for $225 a day. Those lights, when I bought them, were just under $5,000 a piece. So nothing against Lightgear. They make fantastic products. I own a lot of them. But this brings us to that question of what is my market? What is my usage case scenario? What lights become very attractive because I don't need this extra stuff on the bulk of my jobs. So in the feature world, they often need things in a matte light like pixel mapping, pixel zones, pixel control, really good low-end dimming, all those things. Because on a feature, all sorts of different things are coming up. And that light has to be really versatile. It has to cover a wide gamut of possibilities on set. Whereas in the dock world, industrial, commercial world, yeah, we sometimes have to do that, but it's a rare bird, at least in my experience. So I don't necessarily need all that extra stuff in all of my lights. So if I can eliminate some of that, I can find a product like this Intellytech Mega Cloth that really suits the bulk of my jobs and is coming in at a really economical price point. So I think that's really clutch when you're looking and considering a light like this. So we'll dig into talking a little bit more about this. Over here, just leaning here, is the Mega 8. I had 2 of these for the last year and a half or so, and those proved to be really versatile. That's a 3.5 by 5 foot. It goes together and assembles in a very similar way. There's some differences we'll talk about. And as they moved into the Mega 12, there was, a year and a half time, maybe 2 years between when they developed the Mega 8 and then when they developed the Mega 12. So there's some relatively small improvements in color metrics. They've creeped up a little bit. The metrics are a little bit better. And they've got some increase in output. So that's made up of 8 roughly 1x1 panels. The 12, of course, is 12 1x1 panels. So you would expect there's 50% more panel, that this would be 50% brighter, but in fact, it's about 67% brighter. They're just getting a little bit extra out of this newer LED emitter technology, right? So 67%, they're gaining about a 17% increase over what was coming out of the emitters in the original Mega 8. So that's really fantastic. And they've also extended the CCT range. So the original Mega 2, the Mega 8, and the entire Mega 3.0 line in their full color line had CCT range from 3,000 to 10,000. Here, they've increased it on the low end. So we go all the way down now to 2,600 and all the way up to 10,000. So we're gaining an extra 400 Kelvin on the lower end, which is really, really useful. They've also developed more profiles, more DMX profiles. Some of them that we would typically use often on set would be, say, a CCT, green magenta, HSI mode. And Jeff will have that in blackout, I think, relatively soon. And so that's a great addition. The ballast, of course, is bigger, but very, very similar to the Mega 8. The difference really is in the difference in the Kelvin temperature and in the addition of the profiles. One other thing to point out about the emitters themselves is Intellytech is a little different than, say, the Aperture Infinimat, if you saw that at one of the shows. The Godox, say, no-lid line of LED mats. There's no diffusion in those emitters. They're basically raw emitters, and you're diffusing it by putting your choice of diffusion in front of it. Intellytech from the very beginning has incorporated a little bit of diffusion into their emitters. So I find using these raw, even with no diffusion on them, is really, really nice, particularly when you need that extra bit of output. There's so many emitters spread over such a large area. With that little bit of diffusion, they can really play nicely. So I have no qualms about using these naked. And there are times, too, when I would take, say, a Mega 8, and I could put 2 of those naked behind, say, an 8x frame. And then I've got a really narrow depth. I've got 2 C-stands, 2 Megas. They're not very far away from my 8x, and we get a nice, buttery, smooth, soft key light, which is great for a lot of dock interviews I do and industrials and corporate stuff like that. So now the Mega 12 gives us this sort of additional capability, and sort of it all comes into one. So we have a nice 6 foot wide, right? So we have a linear spread of 6 feet, which is often what DPs like, is either a 6 or an 8. So here we have a 6 foot. It's only 4 feet high, but that really is often what we want in this sort of rectangular portrait interview style light. So I think this is a really smart size. So we'll talk a little bit about what you get for your money. Very similar to the Mega 8 sort of all came in one case. Because this is a larger unit, it's packed in the very same similar style rolling case. This is wheels. The build quality is, I think, pretty decent on this. They've upped their build quality over the generations that I've been using the Mega line. So your ballast, your header cable, your mat, your diffusions, all that packs into your rolling case. And there's a separate, I guess you call it kind of a tripod style bag. This is just for the frame. The frame collapses and goes into this. So you have two cases that carry the whole Mega 12. So in the case, and we'll take a look at how this builds together, but you get your mat, you get an LCD, you get a diffusion. And let's talk about the diffusion. So it's supplied with one diffusion. There's an optional second diffusion. The difference is, I think Intellytech refers to these as like one-stop, two-stop diffusion, but that doesn't mean a lot to me. I think just looking at this, it is a sort of grid cloth style. And I would say the heavier diffusion is somewhere close to like a full grid. And I think the lighter one is somewhere between a half and a quarter. And so that it's basically a giant piece of 4x6 diffusion, and this slips over the entire frame. And you've got some Velcro corners, it Velcros to the back of the mat, and then you're basically creating a box, right? Where your edges are protected so there's no spill, and it Velcros on the back. But one of the things that often comes up for me, in addition to say a portraiture light or an interview light, is we often want some sort of big overhead box, right? Maybe it's a sit-down round table interview or a bunch of people on a table interview, or maybe it's a couch or what have you. We want to float a light over. So this is remarkably lightweight for how big it is. And so you could easily float this or two of these and make a giant box. Included in the kit is a skirt. For when you're doing a sort of lantern style or top-down light style. And this is a good sized skirt. And one of the things I like about this skirt, and not all skirts are this way, and there'll be times maybe where this won't be the perfect solution, and I'll talk about that in a second, but the inside of the skirt is lined with silver. Now, why would you do that? Well, one particular great reason you would do that is if you're doing, say, a talking head thing and you want to float a soft light over the table, maybe you're augmenting it with a couple of other keys to help eliminate the sort of raccoony eye thing. Well, that's a lot of what the silver does. So when you're coming down with the silver, it's helping bounce light back in rather than just being completely toppy. And that actually I found works really, really well. There's some situations where you don't want that. It's easy enough to skirt this with the classic commando cloth or duvetine. You can make a longer skirt if you need it. So there's a variety of possibilities. And this just Velcros around the outside. And one nice thing they've done with this LCD is they've added additional Velcro over the top of this so that you could actually, if you needed to, add the skirt and use the LCD at the same time. So that gives you a couple of options relative to this. You could use either diffusion. Right now, Aaron only has two different diffusions. If you've seen any of my videos, say from the original, that are out on Gaffers Salon, from the original Mega Cloth, there are a variety of modifications that I've made to mine to suit my own personal workflow and to provide more options to my DP and my projects. And a lot of that had to do with increasing the number of diffusion options I could offer to a DP, from magic cloth to bleach muzz to unbleached muzz and so forth. So I modified that. Manufacturers don't often like to hear about modifications because they feel like implicit in that is they didn't make it correctly. And that's simply not true. There are many people that are just going to need two styles of diffusion, or maybe even one, and that's going to be good for the bulk of their work. Maybe they'll use it naked, maybe they'll throw a diffusion on. But for those of us that are working maybe in a little higher end market, a lot of my DPs, and this is true also of all of my mats, whether it's a Godox mat or a Light Gear mat, I have unbleached muzz, bleach muzz, magic cloth, all the standard grid cloths. I have some specialty Broca transparencies. I have some Broca N series. So I have a variety of options that I can offer. So I'm going to look at this light. I've only had it now for a week. I had it out on one show, a cooking show, and it worked really, really well. So I'm going to take a look at this and think about if I want to make some alternative options for getting the diffusion on and off. I think it's probably not quite as quick, for example, as say a Light Matte 4 or maybe a Light Matte 8, right? But it is not a huge amount of time. I think once you get the hang of it, you could really get this on and off relatively quickly. It's a few more steps. You got to get it around the frame. You got to cinch the corners. You got to Velcro the back, and then it's on and you're set. And then you could add your LCD back or not. These lights all have to get back into relatively compact cases. And this is great, once again, for the market they're targeting. The owner-ops, the gaffers, the traveling DPs. We want to have a large light like this. Yes, it takes a little bit of time. I don't think it takes an excessive amount of time. Maybe it's slightly more than building a Light Matte 4, but at the end of the day, everything collapses into 2 reasonably sized travel bags. So for a small dock job, I can put this in the back of my minivan along with my C-stands and extra GAC, and I can pull out a 4x6 key light. So that is really, really phenomenal. And particularly when you think at a $3,000 price point all in, I can get this out on the road to the client for $200 a day. So that is a pretty phenomenal deal. So we're going to take a look a little bit at the ballast. I'm not going to go through all the special effects, and you could see other reviews on the original Mega 8. It's very similar. So we'll take a look at the top of the ballast. We've turned the ballast on, and we're in CCT mode. So if we hit the menu option, we've got CCT, special effects. You can go into RGB mode or HSI mode, go into your Bluetooth settings, your DMX settings, your gel library, and your dimming curves. So we select, we're back in CCT. We can adjust our CCT. If we hit select again, we can adjust our green and magenta shift. And then we hit again and we're back to CCT, and our dimming is over here on the right. And if you want to black out, you got a blackout button that takes you, blacks out the light. You hit it again and you're back. Your fan mode is indicated up here, fan off, fan on. You've got your channel indicator. You've got the temperature that it's operating at. And then if you go back to menu and you scroll to DMX, for example, you hit select. So you're now in your DMX mode. You've got your CRMX lumen radio reset. You've got your DMX channel selector. You've got a choice of wired or wireless mode. So you'd have to be in wireless to activate the built-in CRMX. And then DMX group is a bit of a misnomer. It should probably be properly called DMX profile. So I'm assuming GP2 means group profile 2. So if you're on the reset CRMX and you hit that, that'll bring up your DMX group, which probably is more accurately should be labeled DMX profiles. If we take a look at the ballast, we've got our, in my case, gold mount 14.4 only. This will not take 26-volt batteries. You've got one on each side of the unit. If we spin it around, you can see the AC plug, the header cable. You've got your DMX in and out, and you've got your 48-volt input along with the USB connection. The other side only has one thing, which is the plate for mounting the ballast on your stand, the locking V-mount plate. So I've pulled the Mega 12 frame out of its travel bag, and we're going to take a look at this. Now, there's a lot of similarities and improvements in this frame versus, say, the Mega 8. It's the same collapsible design, but it's been built with essentially 2 frames stacked on top of each other with some support rods between them to give it a much more beefy, more stability, more rigidity, because it's a large 4x6. So let's take a look at how long it takes to assemble this frame. So the frame is assembled. All that's left to do now is to lock it in place. And very much like the older ones, there's a little turnbuckle here that you can lock in the crossbar, and then you have a nice rigid frame. A little bit about, you can see here in the background, I have a C-stand. Now, if you look up the weight capacity of, this is a typical Matthews C-stand. It's right around 22 pounds. This comes in maybe a third of a pound under 22 pounds. So you would be right at sort of max capacity. Now that said, I've had this on set for a full week. We used it many, many days inside, of course, on a C-stand, and I felt completely comfortable because we're mainly using it at sort of a typical portraiture height, right? We're not going to try to go top stick on a C-stand with a 22 pounder, but I think at a reasonable height, I felt very, very secure having this on a C-stand. And as a reference point, fully built, this is roughly 4 pounds heavier than the original MC8, the Mega 8, with its softbox attached. So it's only a 4 pound difference. So if you have any experience on a C-stand with that light, then you know it's only an additional 4 pounds. But most times I'm going to put it on a triple riser combi stand, steel combi stand, just to be safe. But I think double bagged C-stand could be acceptable with the limitations on height and that it's properly bagged and that you're inside. So I guess this is going to be a little longer video than I had originally intended, but there's a lot to talk about. And I think if you're interested in buying this light, you know, this is stuff I think you should probably know. So the back mounting point here is, of course, a 2K stud or a baby receiver. So it has a baby receiver on the back side and it has it on the top. Very classic. We've seen that on a lot of fixtures. And it has a lockdown, of course. Now, what's interesting about this, I was chatting with Aaron yesterday, there are 2 hex bolts here, which are removable. It's not like it's glued on here. You can remove these 2 hex bolts and you can remove this whole clamp. So if you want to come up with your own different kind of solution for mounting this, that's entirely possible. This cross shaft is ribbed. I think it would hold a Cardellini clamp pretty well. I have not experimented with that yet. Or if you wanted to leave this built and make some sort of case for it and slide it into the truck, you know, you might want to remove this. So that's a possibility. So we'll take a look at some of the bits and bobs. We're going to start out with taking a look at the ballast clamp, which is typical of all the ballast clamps we've seen. And if I had a con about this clamp, it's not quite wide enough to go, say, on a Matthews medium roller or a Matthews combi stand on the center shaft, but you could easily put it on one of the legs, right? And of course, on a C stand or a smaller 2K stand, this will work just perfectly. Now let me remove this because this is not included with the light. We'll talk about that in a sec. So this is sort of a swivel locking clamp that we've seen in other Intellytech earlier products. You essentially have 2 baby receivers with their lockdowns right on either side. And then you've got an adjustable locking sort of ratcheting style clamp, and it's designed with sort of a rosetta, right? So, the pros and cons of that is you don't have infinite adjustment, but as we know, because we've all been there before, on a heavy light or something that doesn't have a rosetta, it can sometimes start to droop, and no matter how hard you crank down, it's still wanting to sag. So having the rosetta, and it's a pretty fine rosetta, so you can get quite a bit of different points of articulation. So I think on a heavy light like this, I think this was a must-have. So I'm not, to me, that is not a con. I think it was a smart decision that they made. So this comes with, in the kit, a very small baby pin, right? So it goes right in. So for example, if you're using a C-stand, we'll lock into your C-stand, and then this baby stud would go into the baby receiver on the back of the light. And that's perfectly fine if the light is sort of, you know, flat. But the minute you want to start to, say, get a 20 or 30 or 40 degree downward articulation, you're going to be smacking the light right into the stand. So you have to get the light a little bit further away from the stand. So I found just laying around the shop a longer baby pin. So this would be good. It would get you an extra 3 inches or so distance away, and you can get a little bit more articulation. But, you know, if you're going 40, 50 degree articulation, what I carry on my truck is a set of 5/8 rods of different lengths. So I have like 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch 5/8 rods. So I will probably add to my kit 2 or 3 size rods. So depending on how I'm rigging it in that particular day, I can put a longer rod in, get it further away, get my articulation, etc. And of course, the back is also a 2K stud, so there'll be times maybe when I'm rigging overhead, top-down softbox, And that could just go into a 2K pipe clamp, and then I can get some adjustment off the clamp. So one more upgrade I often do to all of my aperture lights, my Pro Light line of lights, is I tend to replace the OEM lockdown. And these are fine, but I really like the Sin-milled lockdown. These were originally designed by Sin-mill to replace aperture lockdowns. But all these are the same threads, and it just gives me a little more positive lockdown. These are about $25 from Sin-mill. I've ordered about a dozen of these, and most of my lockdowns have been upgraded to these. Minor upgrade, it's just personal preference. This will be fine for majority of users, but I've replaced all my lockdowns, so I'm gonna be using this today. Go up. Now, if I wanna articulate this, I have plenty of room to do so. And that might be a sort of typical articulation I might need. In an interview, maybe I'd be a little more like this, and I would be slightly higher. So again, having different length rods if you want this kind of configuration off a C-stand, but it would be the same principle. And when I start to get more articulation, I really want to bump up and use a Matthews like 3-riser or 2-riser steel combi off of a combi head. So it'd be the same principle, except I'd be into a 4-inch combi head rather than a grip head. And then I'm feeling really secure about the rig. So I've got this build on a double bag C-stand. I've got an extension. I'm about maybe 5 inches out. I've got my Sin-milled lockdown, which I love, and we're ready to build. Now, if you wanted to use the mat naked, you would want to put it on the outside. But as we build this and we set it up, we're going to take a look at the mat itself. So you can see it's comprised of 12 panels, you know, roughly 1 inch by 1 inch. And if you have any familiarity with the Mega 3.0 line, this is going to be very, very similar to you, right? We have a short header coming out the back. So in this case, I'm going to want that on the bottom. So I'm going to spin this around. You can see each of the corners have like double Velcro straps, and that's just meant to hang on the frame so that once you do that, you can then go around and buckle and cinch it tight. So we just go to the 4 corners, we get these on. So I've gone around, I've buckled all of them. I've got one last one to do here. It just goes around the frame. You can loosen it. They go right in, there's a quick release, and then you just cinch this tight. And again, you would put it on the front if you want naked. Here it's on the back, and we're ready for the diffusion. So there is a sort of proper orientation to put this on. Because there's a center cross beam that's not perfectly centered, there's a split in the back. So you want to make sure it's lined up. So I've just put a little piece of green tape so I don't have to think about it when I'm doing this. And that orientation is with the Intellytech name, which is right on the top. So the split Velcro I know will mate up. If it goes the opposite way, it's going to be off. So you just want to be sure when you get your frame, if you want to do a little thing like I did, a little piece of colored tape, or you could just eyeball it by looking at where that lines up. So this just, you know, literally slips over the corners. When you first get this, it's very tight. So you have to carefully get it on the first time, so you're careful that you don't tear it or damage it. And over like 1, 2, 3 applications, it starts to stretch out and it becomes much easier to get on and off. And you undo the Velcro tabs and you stretch it like this. You get it on just enough, and then we're going to flip it around and we'll see how it cinches up in the back. So that's on, but there's nothing preventing you from taking an 8x Magic and just clipping it around the frame, right? If you really wanted to get crazy, you could put 4-inch black paper tape around, or if you want to take, you know, bleach muzz, whatever, just some loose fabric, you could clip it. I've already done that with, say, one of John Tyndale's Broca rags. So that's a quick solution too. Now you won't be able to use the LCD, of course, in those situations, but when you just need a big soft light and you want to change diffusion, that could be a simple way with stuff you already have laying around. So because when I first did this, I didn't have my orientation correctly in terms of the way this goes on, I had put the mat on upside down. So I've now got my tail coming out the top rather than the bottom, but not a huge deal. But now I know, since I have my frame mark, which way the orientation is for this, and then I can put this on the correct way next time I do it. So here's what we're looking at. Here's the back. We've come around the corners. We have these straps, but when you start coming around to start to Velcro this, you don't even have to worry about the straps. If you go across them, it doesn't matter. All you're really doing is you're starting to button up the back for light leaks. It's not structurally holding the mat. It's really just about closing this off. It doesn't have to be perfect. You could stretch it a little bit. You can come around. You got to always safety first. If you're going to do this and have a rod sticking out the back, you always want to have a tennis ball on it. But I did this just to show you. I've got my sim mill lockdown. I've got it into the grip head. There'd be times where I might use the OEM one instead. But here, I've got maybe 4 or 5 inches. The rod continues all the way to here. And then I can sort of articulate this down and then bring it up. So you can see if I had the regular one, I wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't be long enough. I could not get it. The mat itself would be hitting the stand. So you can see this is really not bad for an inside setup. I could add a third bag to this. I feel very confident in this, but anytime I had the capability, I would just use a combi stand. There's no reason to push the limits. This is pushing the limits. It's possible. If you're smart, I wouldn't want to go that much higher. I certainly wouldn't want to go to the next riser with the setup, but something just on the first riser here would be fine. And I did this on a sit-down interview. I was probably maybe slightly higher than this height, and I felt confident about it. And again, you could, if you extend this rod further, you could get even more articulation. But once you start doing that and the light's getting further out, really you should go to a combi stand with a true 4-inch grip head and a heavy-duty steel stand properly bagged. So lastly, I've got this right now at about 30%. And you can see that it is made up of 12 roughly 1x1 panels. To me, this is not a con. I really feel like it mirrors and mimics like a big soft window light. There's some people that maybe feel it's a con because if they're shooting reflective objects, it's not perfectly homogeneous surface. Now you could go and clip on something heavier like magic cloth or put a secondary frame. There's a lot of ways around that in those particular situations. But for me, as a sort of portrait light, as an interview light, as an overhead softbox, this works really, really well. And I'm impressed enough. I think I'm going to buy a second one of these. And I'm going to be thinking about modifications I can do to this. If I come up with something interesting, we'll come back in 2 or 3 months. We'll see what other people have come up with. But I think this really hits a sweet spot, right? It doesn't have everything. I mean, there's a reason it's $3,000 and not $8,000, right? We don't have things like pixel mapping and pixel zones. We don't have really good low-end dimming. Those are things that come at a much higher price point and stuff the high-end feature and episodic TV guys would need. But day-to-day for me, the essentials are really good color metrics and daylight and tungsten, the ability to have green and magenta correction, the ability to have CRMX built in so I can run this off blackout or Burt's Gaffers control, etc. The ability when I need it, which for me is rare, to go into some sort of color. I have that capability. And it folds and compacts into really sensible travel case, right? Cases in this case, 2 cases. And I can get it in the back of my minivan. I can unfold it. I can have a large soft light that's very much self-contained. If I put it on a rolling stand, I can roll this. I don't have to build a huge village. I can add the LCD. I can skirt it overhead. I think they've sort of nailed exactly what I need for my market. And hopefully you feel the same way. I will say that Aaron is terrific. I've known him for years now. He's really great. He's always interested in hearing feedback about their products. He's great with, if you have pre-sale questions. He's in Gaffers Salon. He's very receptive to answering any questions. And I can tell you, everyone I've ever talked to said the customer service, if you haven't ever dealt or bought or purchased anything from Intellytech before, their customer service is top notch. I would say they are at the top echelons of customer service in our business. Really second to none. Outstanding job. So that wraps it up. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any comments or questions, leave them, and I will see you back in Gaffers Salon. Thanks so much.